For years, I believed my parents truly loved me, but when I finally stopped being their stepping stone and began living for myself, the truth hit me harder than a slap in the face. They didn't care about me, they cared about what I could give them, so I gave them the last laugh. My name is Mavis, and I've always done my best to be the perfect child. It was never a question of love, at least. That's what I told myself. Stray days, always there when they needed me, always doing exactly what they expected. It felt like I was just lucky to have parents who loved me. But that was the lie I told myself for far too long. I remember the feeling of their pride, the way they smiled when I succeeded. I thought it was love, the compliments, the attention. They made me feel like I was everything to them. But as the years went on, I began to notice the cracks in the facade. Their love wasn't constant. It was conditional. It was only there when I was achieving, when I was making them proud, when I was doing exactly what they expected of me. But when I wasn't, when I stumbled, their disappointment was sharp, cutting. I had to be perfect. Always. It wasn't until I failed that I truly understood the reality of it all. I remember the day like it was yesterday, standing in the living room, a thick silence surrounding me, while my parents stared at me with looks that could pierce through glass. My stomach twisted. My heart dropped to my feet. I'd received a C on my exam, just one C, but it felt like a death sentence. I studied. I really did, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it didn't matter. My father's face was already turning red. His voice thundered in the quiet room. You could do better, you should do better. He snapped. This is what happens when you get lazy. I wanted to scream, to explain how hard I'd worked, how much I'd sacrificed to please them, but I knew it wouldn't matter. They weren't listening, not to my effort, not to my struggles. All they saw was the result, and it wasn't enough. Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I tried. Trying isn't good enough. Mavis. My mother's voice was cold now, distant. You're better than this. You should be better than this. What's wrong with you? I wanted to tell her everything. That I had been trying my best my whole life. That I was tired of the constant pressure, the unspoken rule that my worth was tied to perfection. But I knew better. They didn't want to hear that. They wanted results. They wanted success. And when I didn't deliver, I was nothing to them. The silence after that was deafening. The kind of silence that makes your heart ache. My parents didn't look at me the same way anymore. They had stopped seeing me for who I was and started seeing me for what I could give. And that was when I realized the love they had for me wasn't love at all. It was something else. Something cold, something transactional. I remember standing there, feeling smaller than I ever had in my entire life. They didn't love me. Not truly. They loved the perfect image I provided. When I stopped being that image, when I failed, their love disappeared. I'll do better next time, I mumbled. But I knew even as the words left my lips that it wouldn't matter. The bar had been set, and I could never reach it. My father grunted, clearly dissatisfied. You better, because this is your last chance. And just like that, the wall between us grew higher. I was no longer their daughter. I was just another project they couldn't control, a failure. I walked away, my heart breaking with every step. But I knew it wasn't about the grade anymore. It was about how they'd treated me my whole life. Their love was never unconditional. It was never real. And that was the day I knew that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my chest. After that day, I thought maybe things would get better. I thought I could shake off the hurt, pretend like everything was fine. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. I didn't just feel like I was failing at school anymore. I felt like I was failing at life. Failing them, it was like nothing I did ever mattered unless I was meeting their expectations. I kept pushing through, kept doing what I thought I was supposed to do. But every time I looked into my parents' eyes, all I saw was disappointment. The more I tried to meet their impossible standards, the more exhausted I became. I wasn't just tired of the pressure, I was tired of pretending. I wasn't screaming on the inside, screaming for someone to love me for who I was, not for what I could give. One night, after yet another argument about my grades, I stood in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the window. The cold, harsh light of the kitchen lamp seemed to mirror the chill in my heart. Why is this so hard? I whispered to myself. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know why. Nothing was ever enough. All I knew was that I couldn't keep going. Unlike this, I was suffocating, drowning in their expectations. That was when my mother walked in. Her face, the same one I had always tried to please, looked at me coldly. You're not going to make it if you keep this up, she said, her tone almost bored. You can't keep slacking off like this. You're wasting your potential. I didn't even respond. There was nothing left to say. I had tried so hard to be everything they wanted, and still, It wasn't enough. My mother walked out of the kitchen, without a second glance, as if I were just another obstacle to get past. That was the moment I cracked. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I wasn't going to live my life based on their approval. I wasn't going to keep sacrificing my happiness to meet their impossible standards. The next day, I walked into the living room and stood in front of my parents. They were both sitting there, discussing something that didn't matter to me anymore. The weight of their disappointment was already pressing down on me. But this time, it wasn't going to stop me. "I'm done," I said, my voice firm but trembling. They both looked up, confusion flashing across their faces. "What do you mean, you're done?" my father asked, his tone harsh. "What are you talking about?" "I'm done trying to be what you want me to be," I replied, my chest tightening. "I'm not going to keep living for your approval. I can't do this anymore. I need to live my own life, not one that's built around what you expect from me." For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. My mother's eyes narrowed and my father's jaw clenched. "You're throwing everything away," my mother hissed. "All the sacrifices we made for you, all the opportunities we gave you, and this is how you repay us." I could feel my anger rising, but I forced it back down. "No, you're the ones who never saw me. You never cared about me. You cared about what I could give you, how I could make you look good. I'm done living that way. How dare you talk to us like that?" My father's voice rose, full of rage. "You're ungrateful. You'll regret this." I didn't flinch. I stood there, staring at them. Their words no longer had the power to control me. "I'm not ungrateful," I said softly. "I'm just finally waking up to the truth. I've been living in a world where I was only loved when I was useful, but not anymore." The tension between us crackled. I was waiting for them to explode, to lash out the way they always did, but they didn't. Instead, they sat there, staring at me like I had turned into a stranger. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady. "I'm going to do what makes me happy. I'm going to live my life for me." My father shook his head, his anger turning into something else. "Fine, but don't come crawling back when you fail." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from something else, something stronger. It was from the realization that I was free from the weight of their expectations, free from their control. I didn't need them anymore. I had my own path to walk now, and I wasn't looking back. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept racing, the words from my parents echoing in my head. "You'll regret this. You're throwing everything away." But despite the guilt they tried to push on me, despite the fear that threatened to choke me, I knew deep down that leaving was the only thing that made sense. It was the only way I could breathe again. I couldn't go back to living in a house where I was only loved when I was performing, when I was fulfilling someone else's idea of what I should be. They didn't love me. They loved the version of me that did what they wanted, and that version of me was dying inside. I packed my things the next morning. It wasn't much, just the bare essentials: clothes, my laptop, a few mementos. As I folded my clothes and put them in a bag, my hands shook. But it wasn't fear. It was something else. It was the feeling of taking control for the first time in my life. I didn't tell them I was leaving. I didn't need to. They wouldn't understand. They never had. It wasn't until I was standing at the door, ready to walk out of that house, for the last time, that I felt the weight of everything I was leaving behind. I had lived there for so long, the familiar walls, the smell of my mother's cooking, the sound of my father's voice calling me to dinner. It all felt like a lifetime ago. But as I opened the door and stepped outside, I realized that this was the start of something new, something all mine. I wasn't running away from them anymore. I was walking toward my own future, toward a life where I could be loved for who I truly was, not for what I could do. The world was suddenly wide open, and I didn't know where it would take me, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. It didn't take long for them to figure out I was gone. The phone calls started immediately. At first, I ignored them. Then, they started coming faster with more urgency. "Where are you? Why won't you talk to us? Come home." My mother left me a message one day that broke my heart, but only because I knew she didn't really understand. "You can't do this. Mavis, you're making a mistake. Please, come back. We only want what's best for you." Her words were coated in the same guilt and control they had always used to manipulate me. I didn't answer. I went to a small apartment in the city, nothing fancy, but it was mine. It was the first time I had ever had a space that felt like it truly belonged to me. No one telling me what to do, no one expecting anything from me. I decorated it the way I wanted, put up pictures of places I dreamed of visiting, and made it a sanctuary from everything I had left behind. but leaving didn't mean the pain stopped. There were days when I missed my old life, when I missed the comfort of familiarity. Even if it was toxic, I missed the way my parents used to smile when I did what they wanted. But then, I would remind myself, their love was never real. It was only about what I could give them, and I couldn't keep giving them pieces of myself until there was nothing left. One night, a few weeks after I moved out, I sat on my couch, scrolling through old photos on my phone. I saw pictures of me, with my parents, all of us smiling, looking so happy. But those smiles had been fake, and I knew it now. I put the phone down and looked around my apartment. It was small, but it was mine. I was free. I wasn't who they wanted me to be anymore. I was just me. That's when I finally understood. They had been the ones who needed me, not the other way around. They had needed my success to feel validated, to feel like they were doing something right. But I wasn't a tool for them to use. I was a person, and I deserved to be loved for who I was, not for what I could do for them. I smiled to myself, the weight of the past finally lifting off my shoulders. I had made the hardest decision of my life, and it was the best one. I wasn't going to let their manipulation define me anymore. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval. I was enough on my own, and that was the last time I looked back. The first few months after I left were a blur. I threw myself into my work, focused on carving out a life that was mine, far from the expectations that had shaped me for so long. Slowly, I started feeling the weight lifting off my chest, the constant pressure to be perfect fading away. But then, as time went on, I began to notice something odd. My parents, the people who had once demanded so much from me, started reaching out more and more. At first, it was subtle, a text here, a voicemail there, but then, they started calling me more often, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. My mother even sent a care package, some of my favorite snacks. A note that sounded like it came from a stranger. "We just want to know you're doing well." At first, I was confused. They had never cared about me this much. Not until I walked away. It wasn't until one of their messages came through that I realized what was going on. My father's voice was thick with something I hadn't heard in years. "Guilt, Mavis. I know we didn't always see eye to eye, but your mother and we just want to know that you're happy. You're our daughter, and we miss you." I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to process what I was hearing. Miss me? After all these years, after everything they put me through, they were finally reaching out. I could feel the old guilt creeping back in, but I fought it down. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't their puppet, and I wasn't going to let them manipulate me again. They didn't deserve to be let back in. Not like this. I let the message sit there for a few days. I didn't respond, but it gnawed at me. The way they suddenly acted like everything could just be fixed with a few kind words. They wanted me to come back to them, to forgive them for the years of manipulation. But I had learned something important in the time I'd been away. I had learned that I couldn't keep letting them control my emotions, my life. Finally, one day, I made my decision. I called them back. But this time, I wasn't playing their game. "Hello," my father's voice came through, tentative. "Hey, Dad," I said, my tone even. "I've been thinking about everything, and I wanted to tell you something." There was a pause on the other end. "What is it, sweetheart? What's on your mind?" I could hear the worry in his voice, but I didn't care. This was my moment. "I'm not coming back, Dad, and I'm not going to forgive you and Mom just because you suddenly want to be a family. You only wanted me when I was useful to you, and now that I'm not, you think you can just sweep everything under the rug and make it okay. But it's not. You don't get to make that decision. I've already made mine." His voice broke then, full of frustration. "Mavis, you're being unreasonable. We're your parents. You owe us more than this." I felt my anger rise, but this time, it was different. I wasn't the scared child anymore. I wasn't the one begging for their love. I had my own life, my own happiness, and I wasn't going to let them ruin it. "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "You owe me. You owe me for everything you tried to take from me, for all the years you used me. I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore. I'm not going to live my life on your terms. Not anymore." There was silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't the kind of silence that made me anxious anymore. It was the silence of clarity. I had said what needed to be said. I had set my boundaries, and I was walking away, once and for all. "You'll regret this," my father said, but there was no anger in his voice anymore, only defeat. "I guess we'll never be a family again." "No," I said firmly, "but I'll be okay. And that's all that matters." I hung up before he could say anything else, and for the first time in years I felt peace. I had finally taken control of my life. I had finally walked away from the toxicity, from the people who never truly loved me, not for who I was, but for what they could get from me. And as I sat back, looking out at the life I had built, I realized that I had won. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't their pawn. I was me, strong, independent, and free, and I was going to live my life on my own terms, without guilt, without fear. And that was the last laugh.